Monday afternoon. Thank you all for attending. My name is Lori Bumbaco. I'm an oncology dietitian, and I work at Cancer Wellness Center to do programs like this. I also provide individual consultations, and then I run a few groups as well. So if you're interested in any of those things, please just reach out to me at the conclusion of the program, or check out our website. Check out our YouTube channel, check out social media. I do all of the above because I like to stay informed about all that is happening at Cancer Wellness Center, which is a lot of amazing stuff. So hopefully you agree. I appreciate you taking the time to sit and learn from me today. I always learn a little bit when I prepare presentations like this one. So I'm really going to highlight some fascinating information. This is one of my favorite topics in the world of nutrition and health. So thank you for being here. And you are welcome to put some things in the chat, as Lisa had mentioned. We're going to try to our best to address them at the conclusion of the program. So what I'm going to do is share my screen. I have a PowerPoint presentation, and then you all as registered participants will have access to these slides. We'll send them to you automatically, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end of the program, as I shared, for more questions and answers, hopefully. Okay, so here is my presentation. I'm going to just get everything all set up. And as I shared, this is one of my favorite topics, the gut microbiome. Lisa mentioned we try to offer this once a year because it is such a popular topic among our participants. And I absolutely updated the content this year. That's why it's great to stay tuned. And today I'm probably going to share more information that we need to stay tuned for next year's presentation, as it turns out. So on the agenda, I just want to give a brief overview of what the gut microbiome is, and then how not only how the microbiome affects our nutritional status, but also, as it turns out, one of the most powerful ways we can impact our microbiome, especially our gut microbiome, is in our diet through the foods that we eat. And then also the implications related to our gut microbiome as it relates to disease, specifically cancer. It's probably why most of you are here. And then some frequently asked questions that again, as long as we have some time that allows, we'll have some open Q&A. So we're going to first dive into the overview of the gut microbiome. If you aren't aware, there's actually a handful of different microbiomes on and in our body. So we have our skin microbiome, we have an oral microbiome, we actually have a lung microbiome. So we know the most at this time about our gut microbiome. This is where most of those microbes, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about, that's where they take up residence. And so a lot of research has been done over actually the course of a couple decades. So it's what we know the most of in terms of all the microbiomes. So first things first, some definitions. So the microbiota is defined as living organisms that are on our skin, in our mouth, our GI tract, our lungs, and our reproductive tract. Or sometimes you'll hear it known as the collection of microbes. And then we have our microbiome. So those are two very different things. So our microbiome is the collection of genomes from all of those microorganisms, plus structural elements, metabolites, and the environmental conditions that they create. Really fascinating, but really massive, which we're going to also dive into today. And here's an example. Our human genome has 23,000 genes, whereas the microbiome encodes more than 3 million genes. This is wild to me. Like, I can't even fathom that in my brain. So as you can imagine, this is incredibly complex, and it's taken some time to get a broader understanding of what's really happening with our microbiome and how might we leverage it in order to improve our health or our outcomes from disease. So a little dive deeper into the gut microbiota. There are microbes that live in our body, but most of them are in our gut, as I shared. How many would you guess? So you can put it in the chat, or you can say it in your head, or you can shout it out loud if you're muted. There's 100 trillion. 100 trillion. I can't even imagine that. So just for reference, if we took all those 100 trillion microbes and tried to visualize that, it's about the size and weight of a mango. So the next time you're eating a mango, think of that. This is how many trillions of microbes are in my gut, and you can impress all your friends and family with that little tidbit. So of the microbes, most of them, as it turns out, are two different types of bacteria, Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes. That's relevant for science. Not going to really dive into that today, just for your information. Besides those bacteria, we also know that microorganisms living in our gut are viruses, archaea, fungi, and parasites as well. Most of us have a range of about 400 to 500 different species in our lower gut, and each of us has our own unique, diverse collection of microbes. A lot of times it's been compared to as a thumbprint or a fingerprint, and that it's unique. There's no single fingerprints that are the same, right? So think of that the same way with our gut microbiota. So more of the overview. We develop our gut microbiome during the first 3 years of our life. That's pretty wild, isn't it? And I hope there's more work in this area where maybe during that 3 years of early development that we can, really harness that potential. Because it does make you wonder now, most of us, I'm going to guess every single one of us are beyond 3 years. What can we do now about it, right? But as it turns out, we can. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that. So colonization is initiated during in vitro. It's then shaped by many factors: the gestational age, the type of birth, type of feeding, the mother's nutritional status, and the timing and the introduction of solid foods. And by the age of 3, we basically have our fully developed gut microbiomes, and it's similar to what we will have for most of our life. Our diet, as it turns out, that's why we're here today, lifestyle, some medications, and the way that food is cooked, and also weight gain influence and are influenced by our microbiota, which is wild to me. And we can talk more about that if you want at the end. The microbiome is a living organism. It changes throughout life, so it's dynamic. Even though it sort of stays the same, there are changes. It changes this way, comes back to what it was, changes that way, comes back to whether it's constantly changing. But it's relatively the same one that you've had since you were 3. As we age, and this turns out to be around 60 years old, we begin to lose diversity of the microbes as well as the genes that we have. And I'm going to speak a lot about diversity in the presentation today. Diversity is a really good thing as it relates to our gut microbiome. Now, our lifestyle may be able to influence that, and there's some research directed in this area. So if we're approaching that age, or we are at that age or beyond, we might still want to consider that it's not too late and that our lifestyle might be able to maintain or maybe even improve diversity. Our microbes process information from everything we ingest, which is just so wild. Everything, think about it. Our digestive tract is sort of like a bridge in that way. So it connects inside of our body to the outside world. And we know this about our lower digestive tract, is that the microbes help to reinforce the barrier that maintains structure and integrity. And we want things to pass through. Some things we want to come through into our body, but for some things we do not. And so we want to reinforce that barrier. So the microbes are responsible for that. They do a lot of things, as it turns out. They assist with digestion and absorption of nutrients. They produce bioactive substances like neurotransmitters and enzymes and even short-chain fatty acids. They're responsible to modulate our immune response. And research is evolving. Currently, if you think about how complex this is, we really only have a limited understanding of the interaction between our body and the microbiome. But for all of those reasons, some people refer to the gut microbiome as our microbial partners, right? So we kind of coexist with them in health and in disease. So we'll talk more about that in a moment. How does the gut microbiome and food interact? That's probably why you're here today, right? So what is even happening in the gut microbiome? It's where most of our immune system resides, up to 70%, as it turns out. And our microbes are primarily responsible for that. In the gut microbiome, it's responsible for assisting the body to digest and absorb nutrients from the foods that we eat. It helps to actually harvest inaccessible nutrients or energy from what we eat. So we might eat some foods and we might not be able to get potentially maybe some amino acids or proteins or some of our other fibers. We might not be able to get them from the food based on our human cells, but our microbes actually do, which is another just fascinating concept to me. They are responsible to synthesize vitamins, and so you see the ones listed there. They support the metabolism of drugs. They assist in renewing gut cells. They act as a barrier, which I was explaining earlier. And they also produce short-chain fatty acids. There's a lot of interest in this area as well. An example of a short-chain fatty acid is butyrate. And butyrate has a lot of data that suggests that it can induce genetic changes, which are a good thing, that are protective against cancer. So it's almost like a downstream effect. We can see how, again, this is so complicated. The microbes are metabolizing something, they're eating and metabolizing something and producing these metabolites called short-chain fatty acids. It's the short-chain fatty acids that actually have a systemic effect throughout our body. It's just so fascinating to me, if you ask me. But that's everything that's happening in the gut microbiome, which is a lot. Now, as it turns out, food affects the activity of the microbiome as well. So we can influence the microbiota with our diet in as little as, another quiz question, how quickly can we influence our gut microbiome? It's 2 to 4 days. I've read different numbers here, but this is the most recent research that I've read, about 2 to 4 days. That's very quick, right? A long-term diet pattern seems to be the most important. So even though we think, oh, in a couple days, I'm going to eat this way and I'm going to make the change, we want to think about this as a habit, right? And we want to think about the pattern as what's really going to help impact that change over time, right? Because if we go on a diet and we try to change the microbiota and the microbiome, and then we stop eating that way, it's just going to go back to what it was. Okay, so we want to think long-term diet pattern. And what that does is potentially influence not only the types of the microbes, but also the way that they behave. And as it turns out, it's a plant-based diet that does it. So a plant-based diet has been shown to be associated with the greatest diversity of microbes. And the way that they do that is they can just ask people what they're eating, or ask people to eat a certain way and then collect their stool samples and then analyze them, and then they could see this outcome as a result. Now, there's a nuance to this plant-based diet. It's not just highly processed plant foods, right? Because I can think of a handful of them that aren't very nourishing, don't offer a lot of nutrition, and probably not going to impact the gut microbiome the way we want to. So I'm gonna explain this a little bit more, but it's mostly unprocessed whole plant foods. That's what we're looking to do. Now, I'm going to reiterate a few concepts here. Having a wide array of microbes, or having that diversity of those microbes, it's what makes our microbiome more capable, more resilient over time, and especially in the course of disease. So there's 2 ways that we can support the gut microbiome. I'm sharing a lot today. I think the next few slides are what I really want you to pay attention to. Okay. So the first way is to eat a diverse plant-based diet. So the more diverse the diet, the more diverse the microbes, which is beneficial for us. And the second way is to eat those very foods that strengthen the actions of the microbiota. So fermented foods seem to do it. They contain live and active cultures, yogurt, kefir, kombucha, some of our fresh fermented vegetables all contain these live active cultures. And then also prebiotics. Prebiotics are something that I am really a champion of. I wish I could, I don't know, like make some t-shirts that say like I'm a prebiotic queen, because I swear I think they are really a key to what could benefit many people that I work with. And I'm really fascinated to learn more as research is unfolding. But prebiotics are special types of fibers found in certain plant foods. And good examples are onion, garlic, sunchokes, wheat bran, asparagus, and actually dandelion, that really go directly to the microbes and give them fuel. It's what they like to eat, are those foods. Now, not only those foods, right? So some microbes like garlic, some microbes like wheat bran, some microbes like asparagus. And so this is where, again, we want to think diversity. We want to think a wider range of these foods. So let's start first with diet diversity, a little bit more about that. So there's an ongoing project called the American Gut Project, so aptly named. And they're calling it like the greatest public science experiment known to man. And it's like this large collection of American citizens, and I guess you could still sign up for it, I'm not sure. It's been going on now for, I think, over a decade. And the most important information that has come out from this project so far is that they have looked at over 11,000 people And again, all walks of life, probably all different disease types. I think they're looking for relatively healthy people here, though. And I can report back on that. But in this American Gut Project, it showed a link between diet diversity and gut microbe diversity. So that's what I've been sharing all along. It looks like eating a varied whole food plant-based diet leads to microbiota diversity, which is a good thing. Now, how much so? What they found specifically is that those in this sample that ate 30 or more different plant foods compared to those who ate 10 or less plant foods, that led to more diverse microbes in the gut. So we're sort of looking, if you ask me, what the experts are saying is aim for 30, right? 30 different plant foods a week, which I think is a challenge, but can be done. But I think if we're starting at 10, then maybe we try to do 11 different plant foods in a week. And I think that's the nature of nutrition and forming habits, right? We want to make small, achievable changes that are going to probably make a difference over time. So that basically works out to about 4 to 5 different plant foods every day. It's doable, right? I think it's doable. You can ask yourself this and see if you need to work with me or not. But here's some examples of how you might go about doing that. You might grab a bag. Maybe you have a salad. Maybe you have a salad for dinner every night. I certainly know people who do that. Or maybe you try to have a salad a few times a week. Rather than just grabbing maybe one type of lettuce greens, look for like mixed bags, right? So what other varieties of lettuce greens can you have? Maybe it's not just romaine that you're grabbing, or red leaf or arugula. Maybe do a handful of different types, right? Diversify your snacks. So like I'm guilty of this, all the above. So I think, okay, I'll grab some almonds, but maybe we could have almonds and walnuts and pecans and pistachios and just have a whole pantry, or even maybe keeping them in the fridge if we need to. And just one day out of the week, if we like nuts as a snack or part of a meal, we choose a different one. We certainly can do that with seeds as well, and also dried fruit or crudités, right? Like I tend to have cucumbers and tomatoes are starting to come into season, so I'll grab those, but maybe I need to diversify that a little bit more. I certainly have a piece of fruit for a snack. Love the idea of cutting up some different types of fruit, making a fruit salad. Those are all examples of how to diversify your choices. I certainly do this. Think about your different vegetables. Rainbow carrots are a really good example. Bell peppers, if we buy just green or we buy just red, could we get orange and yellow? Think about your onions and the different colors. All that variety will add up over time. Different pastas, love this idea. So not just whole wheat or just white pasta, but there's bean-based pasta, there's lentil pastas. I've seen quinoa pasta. I haven't seen buckwheat pasta, but if you find it, let me know because I'd love to try it. And then think about beans and lentils, another great example of plants, and certainly a diverse range in our bean family, right? And how we could easily add them to something, right? So I think of lentils in a bolognese, or chickpeas in a curry, or black beans in a quesadilla, all different types, right? You see what I'm doing there? That's what we're trying to do. Now it takes work, and we're not all here at this point in time in our life, but it's something to work towards. The next thing I shared is, so there's two ways to sort of support our gut microbiome biota. The first is the diversity of the diet. The second is to eat foods that will support it. So let's start first with fermented foods. So they are a potential source of probiotics, but technically they're not defined as probiotics. And I'm going to talk more about that to clarify that. So this would include different brands because again, we're thinking variety. So if you like yogurt, could you buy a different brand of yogurt every week and mix it up, right? You would get different cultures when you eat that. Same with kefir. Same with our fermented vegetables like sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha. All different brands are going to use different live active cultures and give you some variety and diversity. Prebiotics, you know, I'm the #1 fan here. They are food for the beneficial microbes. They eat, and so the microbes actually eat the fiber in the prebiotic foods, and they promote. This helps them kind of thrive and flourish. So again, oats, onion, garlic, leeks, sunchokes, asparagus, wheat bran, those are the highest. And they also are added to foods. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And I've seen them in some supplements as well. So a little bit more about fermented foods. We've been consuming them for 14,000 years, right? They were like our ancient form of refrigeration. Foods, and they're defined this way: foods made through desired microbial growth and enzymatic conversions of food components. Sounds so fancy. Generally, lactic acid bacteria are used for dairy, veggies, cereal, and meat. But not all fermented foods contain live active cultures. I'm going to talk more about that just again to reiterate a point. So if a food has been pasteurized, if a food's been smoked or baked or filtered, it can kill or remove those live microorganisms, right? So it no longer by definition is then a probiotic. Does it make it a bad choice for us and maybe something not to include? No. There's lots of reasons why we eat foods. They all have these different qualities about them. We want to think about it, food in that way. And if that's not easy for you to do, that's why a dietitian is helpful, okay? And also at the same time, if a fermented food has a microbe, proven, and this takes some science here, if a fermented food has a microbe proven to be a probiotic, proven that that probiotic is at the right dose or inadequate amounts, then that fermented food is allowed to call itself a probiotic. In any other example, it cannot. It's not allowed to be probiotic. So the takeaway of that point is that any foods that we might see, like if it's especially a particular brand, or if there's some influencer on social media suggesting that this is a probiotic food, it's probably just a claim, right? Because we need that specific definition to be adhered to. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more, right? But a lot of the claims that are being made about foods and fermented foods being probiotics for the gut, that's a stretch. It's not really true. So when I say that, then you might be wondering, well, then what's the point of eating fermented foods, right? If they're not like a probiotic. Well, they do some things for us, as it turns out. And it's probably a combination of effects. It's probably because of the live active cultures, but also the food itself. It might be a plant food. And so maybe there's some benefit on numerous levels and why it might be helping our gut health. So fermented foods, we know this enhances the taste and the texture of food. As it turns out, microbes, like so live active cultures, when we eat them in foods, they have been associated with improving GI health, and they have been associated with lowering the risk for type 2 diabetes because they might modulate our blood sugar. And they have been associated with lowering the risk for cardiovascular disease. So if you're like in the area of wanting all of those things, then it makes sense to eat some fermented foods because that's by association. So when people are eating those foods, it seems like this is the outcome. So why not just do it, right? Now, what they also do is the live active cultures in fermented foods have been shown to convert unsaturated fatty acids to conjugated linoleic acid, which has anti-inflammatory effects, especially in dairy. It enhances the availability of B vitamins, vitamin K, magnesium, and zinc. The cultures in fermented foods can create isoflavones called genistein and dazzine, and they are cancer fighters that are found in some of our whole soy foods. And they enhance the activity of polyphenols, and polyphenols are in some of the plant foods that we eat that actually act like prebiotics, that good fiber that serves to be fuel. So this is cool. Like there seems to be this synergistic, complex relationship happening here. All the more reason to sort of think about eating these fermented foods regularly. Research also suggests that eating fermented foods has been shown to increase microbe diversity and reduce inflammation. All good things. Okay, so prebiotics, my favorite. They're defined as a substrate that is selectively utilized by host microorganisms conferring a health benefit. So again, these definitions matter because if we're looking for an outcome, we got to comply with the definition in order to achieve that outcome. We can't just throw things at something and hope that it's going to help us, right? So plants that are high in prebiotics, I've been listing them so far, but I'm going to, again, share the ones that I'm aware of. Onions, garlic, bananas, chicory root, sunchokes, leeks, asparagus, oats, and soy foods. They're often added to foods as well, and I've also seen them added to beverages, but they typically don't make that claim on the front of the package or anywhere else on the package. It's not like this food has prebiotics in it. It's not obvious to me. So what we can do is actually turn that label over and look under the ingredients, and we can look for these words. So you might have to print this slide out or take a picture of it and bring it with you to the store So we're looking for galacto-oligosaccharides, fructo-oligosaccharides, oligofructose, chicory fiber, and inulin. Those are very commonly used as prebiotics in some foods. And when we see those words, that means that product has prebiotics added to it. Now, what the research is suggesting is that if we're looking for improved gut health, they want us to eat anywhere from 3 to 5 grams a day. What does that even mean, Lori, right? So I'm going to help with that a little bit more. So here are some, you just see these two panels. One is an example again of where we see prebiotics added to a food. So if you look on a label, you might see in some gut healthy bars or cereals. They're certainly added to infant formulas. You might see them in some like gut-friendly drinks, and that's sort of how they're marketed, or the claims that might be on the label, even though they carry no scientific basis to put those claims. But that's where they're getting away with it, is that they've added these prebiotics. I've not seen them quantifying the amount that they've added, so that's where it can be a little tricky. And some of you may be familiar with a very popular prebiotic soda that we could talk about at the end. And they settled a lawsuit because they claimed that they had more prebiotics in them than they did. So lots to figure out here, right? So if you ask the dietitian, if you're here because you're thinking, I just want to know more about this, I want to support my gut health, but I don't have any real specific indication to think about taking a probiotic, I don't have a gut-related condition, I just want to eat better to support my gut health. And even though that seems sort of vague, I think that's smart because the foods that you're going to do to accomplish that are really healthy foods, by the way. I would support that. And so for most people I work with, I turn them towards the panel on the right here on the slide. So a lot of whole plant foods, right? I see a lot of nuts and seeds. I see some wheat bran. I see some oats, some beans, but the onion and different types of onion, garlic, leeks, asparagus. I often see artichoke on the list, but sunchokes are really high. Dandelion greens are really high. Kellogg's All Brand cereal. They probably did some research, so they're allowed to say that. All of those foods, I think in sensible amounts, not a crazy big portion size, all of those would give you some prebiotics. So thinking about incorporating them pretty regularly into your diet. Okay, so how to eat more of them. Let's talk about that. So dandelion greens, yes, they'll eat in your yard. But I would prefer you buy them from the grocery store or from your farmers markets. You might see them available. And they're super easy to add. I love them in a salad, in a stew, in a casserole. Some people I work with will make teas out of them, or you can easily saute them with some garlic. Then you're getting a couple different prebiotics there. Now, raw garlic does seem to maintain more of, and a lot of these foods when consumed raw are going to have more of the prebiotic potential that I'm aware of. It's hard to really define that because no research has really determined that, but the experts say think variety, right? So if you can have some raw, you're probably going to have some cooked too. But again, think variety. Variety is the way to go here. So I think of garlic, and I typically don't eat it raw, but I might if I'm making a hummus or another type of a dip, or if I'm making a vinaigrette, right? I might crush up garlic and put it in the vinaigrette, or if I'm making a guacamole or a salsa. That's where we might be able to find, especially this time of year, it's so appropriate with those choices, some great ways to incorporate some raw garlic. Leeks, we're not really in the season anymore, but they add a nice sweet onion flavor, right? So really bring in some traditional, I think of frittatas, I think of quiches, but they're great in a pasta soup. Think of really including them when you see them available. Raw onions, similar to garlic, lots of different applications. I mean, just slicing different ones into your salad. Again, that salsa, gazpacho, lightly steaming asparagus or using even a vegetable peeler to eat raw asparagus ribbons, just like you might for like a zucchini squash. If you've ever made like a zucchini ribbon salad, asparagus is lovely that way too. And yes, we can eat asparagus raw. Adding wheat bran to hot cereal or in your smoothies if you're already having smoothies or in your yogurt. I've not tried this because I don't do a lot of baking, but apparently about a third of a cup of wheat bran substituted for baking flour when you bake shouldn't alter the outcome. But if you want to give it a try, report back. I'd love to hear. And then thinking about a banana and topping it with, again, something firm. I'm really thinking complete here. Like a fermented dairy, like yogurt, adding some fruit. I would even add on there some nuts or seeds, and that's delicious as a nice little dessert. So what about probably also what are you here for? Learning a little bit more about the microbiome and how it relates to health and disease. So dysbiosis is something that is, I'm going to actually define in the next slide, but it seems that when dysbiosis happens, it could be a setup for different types of diseases, and they're listed here on the slide. We probably know the most about inflammatory bowel disease as it relates to dysbiosis. I would say that, and then the metabolic conditions like type 2 diabetes. That seems to be the most solid data, the most solid research at this point in time. But a lot of these other conditions are being actively researched, and some really fascinating information has come forth about them. So dysbiosis is really basically what it sounds like. It's an imbalance of the microbiota, and it stems from a reduced diversity for some reason. I'm going to explain in a moment. The loss of commensal bacteria or the overgrowth of pathogenic species. So what causes this? It's some medications that we take, long-term antibiotic use, aging, unfortunately, infectious diseases, low fiber, highly processed, standard American diet, chronic stress has led to dysbiosis, so all really good to know. Sometimes the gut microbiota can bounce back after it's been in this state of dysbiosis, because maybe we were on antibiotics for some reason or had surgery to our gut and we were in dysbiosis, and then it just took a few months and then we were back to what we used to be. Sometimes it doesn't bounce back as quickly for some people, and that's really where we have work to do with personalizing our understanding of this. And this could therefore remain in dysbiosis for somebody. And this may lead to disease. It might be a bidirectional relationship. So sometimes disease can create dysbiosis, and that may matter for someone diagnosed with cancer. So we'll talk about that. Now, in 1994, we did learn that H. pylori increases the risk for gastric cancer. That's kind of, seems like forever ago. But I guess it's not too, yeah, it is forever ago. Which that kind of sparked our attention. Oh, like this bacteria causes gastric cancer. That's a problem, right? So that kind of led further investigation and questioning about other microorganisms and could they influence cancer risk. So this is a really complicated slide, but what I want, I'm not going to really explain it too much, but really what the point of this slide is that there are a few, more than a few, 4 examples of the way in which the microbiota or microbiome is impacting cancer. So it could be directly in the gut. It could be related to the metabolites that are created, again, either from the pathogenic bacteria because we're in dysbiosis, or the good ones, and maybe it's creating these great metabolites that are helping reduce the risk for cancer. It could be through inflammation, which we know is a hallmark of cancer. And it could be because there is a disruption in the barrier of the gut. Now, as it turns out, and this is sort of brand new, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around this, when someone has a tumor, apparently the tumor itself goes back. It like secretes these metabolites and other substances. It goes back to the gut, and it influences the gut too. So it's like sort of this crosstalk between the two is happening. That's like, oh, wow. Right? So it's not just one directional here, it's bi-directional. It's really fascinating. And this probably I'll have to report back more on next year because I think it's super fascinating. All right, so a little bit more about cancer. I ended the last other slide with this. So in 1994, that's when it kind of all started. It was like, oh, H. pylori, that may cause gastric cancer. What's going on here with these microorganisms? So we do see that some estimates are up to 20% of cancers may be related to changes in the microbiota that specifically cause dysbiosis. Species, they think. So there are specific types of species, and I'm going to give an example next, that may play a role in the development of cancer. The evidence is highest for GI cancers because the thought has been for so long that it's what's happening in the gut probably is really the greatest impact on the gut, right? But there's more to that, and they're only just learning that. So Campylobacter concissus and Campylobacter rectus, they have been associated for pre-malignant Barrett's esophagus. So they're seeing these strains are problematic which is just so wild, right? So if somebody has these strains, we got to act fast, right? And it turns out for other cancer types too. I just don't have them listed here. There are many factors that modulate this relationship. So what's happening inside our body, the microbes themselves, and the environment that they're creating. So it's really super complex and complicated, and nothing that I can really even wrap my head around or present to you in a way that is meaningful. I'm going to give you meaningful takeaways of what we currently know. There's still a lot to learn. Okay. So not only with cancer, but cancer treatment, the microbiome matters. So microbiome composition may modulate the effectiveness of different therapies as well as the side effects of different therapies. Now, the best example of this is for immunotherapy, and maybe you're familiar with this. So as it turns out, when someone's on immunotherapy, what they've learned is that it may work better for those of us that have a more highly diverse community of gut microbes. Wild, right? So if that's the case, then what can we do about it, right? We might be able to manipulate the microbiome in order to influence inflammation, influence our immune response or lack thereof, and then other processes that are related to cancer and cancer treatment. This is a huge undertaking. It requires extensive sequencing of microbial DNA as well as bioinformatic analyses. So it's going to take time, right? Because we have how many genes in the microbiome that I report? It's a lot. It's a lot of work still that needs to be done, but it's a very important step in personalizing cancer care, and researchers view this as an immense opportunity. So stay tuned as we learn more. I know I am like really eager to see what comes out of all of this. I'm eager because we might be able to have even more of an impact through diet, which is really exciting. Okay, so the bottom line about microbiome, microbiota, and cancer. It's super complex. There's a lot happening here. There's a lot of different interactions, and we're only just beginning parts of it to understand parts of it. Experts are working to understand how the microbiome can either hasten or slow cancer development, as well as influence our response and tolerance to anti-cancer therapies. Really exciting as well. So the takeaway, while we're waiting to get some more information, is to try to eat in a way that suggests you will have gut diversity in terms of your microbes, right? That's been sort of the big takeaway of the presentation so far. So that means eating a diverse, mostly whole food, plant-based diet. Okay. So now we're going to basically wrap here, which is really nice timing. So frequently asked questions and then some a true and false question for you. So some people will ask me, how do I improve my gut? How do I restore the gut microbiome? My gut's a mess. I need help improving it. So that's such a hard question to answer, right? Because what was your gut before? Because we didn't measure it. We don't know what was happening, what microbes you had, right? And what amount. So how can we get it back to what it was when we don't know what it was in the first place, right? We haven't figured that out. And we don't even know if there's sort of like an ideal place to be in terms of your gut microbiome. So really difficult question to answer. Keep in mind, we're all have a unique microbiota, right? And microbiome therein. And so we don't know if we can improve or restore it. We don't really know how to go about that, right? Because again, what might work for most people probably will work for us, but do we really know for certain? No, because we're all so unique. Don't automatically assume that your gut is in dysbiosis. I would say what would make you assume that is if you have digestive complaints, if you have gas, if you have bloating, if you have irregularity. What I want you to do first is get a medical evaluation, get everything ruled out. Do you have an underlying condition that could be treated otherwise? And I don't want you to, dismiss addressing that and assuming that you have dysbiosis. Okay. If all that's done and you've been working with your healthcare team and you've been having this discussion and you have the opportunity to ask, hey, do I have dysbiosis for some reason? I had surgery. I was on these antibiotics. I just had radiation in my gut. What's going on here? Can you help me? They may say, well, we don't really know, but here, why don't you work with a dietitian? Because maybe you can learn how to improve the gut diversity through your diet. And that would be nice. Another question that I get is what probiotics do I need to take? So maybe you've been asking up until this point, how come I haven't spoken about probiotics? So the definition of them, so it's a good opportunity. The definition of them is here: live microorganisms that, when administered in adequate amounts, confer a health benefit on the host. Those three conditions have to be satisfied in order for that to be either the food or the beverage or the dietary supplement to call itself a probiotic. So each type of condition, did you know, requires different probiotic doses and strains. So for example, if someone has a gastrointestinal concern, they may require a different probiotic than someone who has, maybe they're concerned about cognitive health. Maybe they're concerned about vaginal health. So they may need to take very different probiotics that have live microorganisms at the right amount or the right dose that have been proven to be beneficial. Okay, so that the research has to back it up basically, right? That's what we're looking to do. We don't know though if you don't have any of those conditions. So let's just say you're like, I just want to improve gut health. I just want to help myself. I was diagnosed with cancer. I'm on treatment. I'm done with treatment. I just want to help myself. What do I do? What probiotics do I take? We don't have an answer for that right now. So we don't really know if you need to take a probiotic or not. We do know if you have a certain condition. I'm going to share it in the next slide or two. We do know there are certain probiotics that have clinical indication that should be recommended to somebody who has that specific condition. I'm going to share that. But otherwise, we don't really know. So another really difficult question to answer. And we also don't know, especially if someone's on active treatment, if it's safe or efficacious, right? So that's why sometimes your oncologist will say, I don't really want you taking anything. You could eat probiotics, you can eat those live active cultures, but the dose in a dietary supplement is probably a lot higher. And there have been just a couple case reports where they've been problematic for people who were on active treatment and were severely immunocompromised. So we can talk about that at the end if we need to as well. Okay. So are they necessary in a supplement? Well, as live microbes, as long as they pass through and influence our body's microbes, then they're a probiotic, right? But what I want you to know about probiotics are that they very rarely permanently colonize. So that's a misconception. A lot of people I work with think that, oh, I need to take this because I need to get my good flora back. That's not what happens when you take a probiotic. They just kind of pass through, right? But when they're passing through, they do some good things for us, and that's what's been indicated by the science. They actually end up using very similar, they behave like the beneficial microbes do in the gut. So they're kind of friends, but they come and go, right? Now they're not all the same, so different ones work differently. That's what I've been explaining. And you would want to choose a dietary supplement based on your need and based on whether or not it's been supported through the science. So what some people will do is if they do find that that's helpful, they might try a product for a month. And if there's no benefit, they don't notice any appreciable difference, then they might discontinue it. And a lot of times that's sort of my approach in general with things. Try it out for a month. If it's not going to harm you and you want to see if it benefits you, then you'll know after a month. So I have another true or false question. This is the last bit of questions. So fermented foods are probiotics. This is mostly false. So fermented foods, even though they have live active cultures in them, by the definition, it doesn't satisfy the conditions to be a probiotic. We don't know if it has the right strain we needed to know, right? Most fermented foods are just this wild collection of microbes. We don't really know what they are. We need a specific strain at the right dose, proven to benefit the person, right? So fermented foods, they lack all of that. Even though they have live active cultures, we don't know if they have the strain, the right amount, and if they benefit us. So they have to be alive, they have to be delivered to the target that it's intended to be delivered to in the right amount and result in a benefit. So a lot of these foods like kombucha, kimchi, sauerkraut, pickled vegetables, sourdough, fermented dairy, they are certainly nutritious. I recommend them for most people I'm working with. They probably will benefit you because I shared on that one slide, when people eat these foods, they seem to have a benefit, but they're not working the way that we might be thinking a probiotic works. They're two very different things. Still beneficial, but just not the probiotic we think it is. Okay, so now you're wondering, what are the probiotics? So I included this slide for you, and this reference at the end in the resources. This is a website that they update annually. It's a clinical guide to probiotic products available in the US. When I work with individuals one-on-one, a lot of times I'll pull it up and we'll look at this ourselves. And this is just sort of a screenshot of one of the pages. There's like 3 pages worth of products. So you can literally look up and see, I struggle with constipation. So it looks like this Optivac probiotics, Bifido and fiber, is the one for me, or maybe one to try, because it has one next to it in parentheses. That means it's high level of evidence that it works. And it looks like I need to take 25 billion culinary forming units per sachet, and I need to take one a day. So it's very prescriptive here, and it actually includes the strain. You see B. lactis. Let me take out my pointer. It actually has B. lactis, BB12. Very specific. We never see that like on a yogurt label, do we? No, but we see it on a dietary supplement because they've shown that this particular strain helps with constipation in this amount. Okay. So more examples like IBS, right? So this particular product has these particular strains, this amount of drops, and this amount of drops a day. Okay, that's again where a healthcare provider or someone like myself can help. If you're having these very specific conditions that you want to dive deeper, maybe you have ulcerative colitis and you want to take a little Mutaflor. Cool, it's probably going to help you. Antibiotic associated diarrhea, Optivac probiotics every day extra. Cool, that's probably going to help you. All right, so that's the difference there with probiotics in a dietary supplement versus the probiotics that we eat in food, which I technically can't call a probiotic. So this is the last slide, I believe. So if we're going to build a gut-friendly fridge, it always comes back to food. We want to think variety, right? That's the moral of the story. Eat variety. Vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, lentils, frozen even counts. All right, just eat them. Eat a variety. Don't worry or obsess over the little details. Just eat them. So fermented foods are also great to include. So yogurt, different brands of yogurt, kefir, kimchi. Cottage cheese is often cultured with live active cultures. Just eat them, right? Look for ones that are lower in added sugar, right? If you're really looking for the most bang for buck with nutrition. And then colorful fruits and vegetables, again, variety. Think of those prebiotic rich foods like asparagus, onions, garlic, sunchokes, leeks, dandelion greens, wheat bread. Thinking that those are really going to give the food to the live active cultures that you're eating, or the ones that already reside in your gut. And what they're going to do is start to repopulate and flourish, and they're going to become really active. And that's where we're going to probably see the greatest benefit long term for your gut health and probably systemic health. So I'm going to share some slides or resources after the slide, but when you get these slides, you can click on this link, make fiber a daily habit. Most of us are not eating recommended amounts of fiber, like 1 out of 10 of us is, I think. So we want to eat more fiber. And if we eat more fiber, chances are we'll probably eat more prebiotics. Chances are we'll probably eat more of a whole food plant-based diet. So if you click on this link, it's going to pull up from the USDA a nice list of all of the different types of plant foods in what serving gives what amount of fiber. In general, I recommend 14 grams of fiber per every 1,000 calorie that you eat. That's kind of complicated. Just think about eating more fiber and like starting slow and adding more, because that can help your gut acclimate to all that extra fiber you're going to be eating. These are my favorite resources, the ones that I go to anytime that I'm thinking about the microbiome, or if I'm working with somebody, what I might recommend or just use as my own resources. That first link is incorrect. So it's the International Society for Probiotics and Prebiotics. It's really the expert organization, and I have budget bites, so I'm so sorry. I'll replace that link. But even if you Google ISAPP, it is phenomenal. They have consumer-friendly information. There's like infographics, there's videos, and then they have the science-based information. So I look through some of that, and there's like research articles. It's really phenomenal. The Gut Microbiome for Health is also a really great website with a lot of information, a lot of helpful updated content, a nice little blog. how to eat more plants. So this is all based on that research study about eating 30 different plant foods for the week. So she is a dietitian, Megan Rossi, and it's really the practical part of improving your diet towards a whole food plant-based diet for that gut diversity. So I think this is the way to go if you're looking to do that. And then that clinical guide to probiotic products available in the US, as I shared. So you can click right on that link, it'll pull up that page, and you can share that with your healthcare provider too if you like. All right. So I just want to share with this last thought too before we go into questions. Think about food this way, in a whole nother way now, baby. What we eat doesn't only nourish us, but it also feeds the trillions of microorganisms that live in our gut. It includes prebiotic fibers. That's going to feed our gut. Fermented foods will help our gut do what it needs to do best. And that's going to help us make some progress towards the path of a healthy gut. And maybe, again, implementations for systemic health benefits. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share. And I know there were some things in the chat. So I'm just going to take the liberty to look at them. Just answer them.
Lori, I was going to ask, do you want me to read them or do you just want to look at them?
I'll look at them. Is that okay?
Okay, of course.
Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So I'm just going to go down the line. So the best yogurts, is it a good snack for healthy gut versus the sugary heavy ones that taste great? Yeah. The high sugar ones are like dessert, right? And maybe we can treat them that way, and then maybe they might benefit us. But yes, I like to recommend typically lower sugar or plain yogurts. Hopefully what you heard from me is eat a variety. So try different brands, right? I tend to do what's on sale because it just helps me, and I'm kind of budget friendly in that way. But you'll get different cultures when you do that. So that's going to add to the diversity of your diet. If you don't mind plain, that's great because you can use it in savory applications, like make a ranch dressing or a ranch dip with it, or tzatziki sauce. Or you could add your own little sweet, like so add your own little bit of honey or your own maple syrup or your own fresh fruit or frozen fruit. And when you do that, you're probably going to add less than the food company manufacturer does. So I like that approach. All right, hopefully that's a helpful answer. What are sunchokes? Jerusalem artichokes. Great question, Wendy. So they're in the grocery store. So I haven't ever used them. I'm guilty. Another thing I got to work on. I've never used them. I've never had one. I'd like to try. So if we have a store tour in the upcoming year and you want to take a walk with me through the store and we could find some Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes, maybe we can give them a go. I'm gonna assume they're like a tuber, so they're probably used very similarly like we would cook tuber vegetables. Okay. Dandelion greens. I've seen dandelion greens in some grocery stores at certain times during the year. I, guilty, have not been to the farmer's market this year. So this is the week, I hope, and I want to believe some of our farmers are maybe offering that. If anyone else has any thoughts about where we can find dandelion greens, I'm definitely open to that. I've seen them in supermarket stores though, specifically Whole Foods. So if you want to try there. I'm going to keep going. I use onion and garlic in cooking. Does it lose its probiotic values? It might. I think that's a really great question. It might, but it's hard to say. And I think when they try to analyze this, it's really difficult to do it. I want you to keep using it. So you're probably getting some prebiotic effects because that's what garlic and onion do. But maybe start, and this is where change, is possible and can maybe make some improvements. If you can find ways to use it raw, if you can tolerate it raw, some people I work with don't, then you might find some interesting ways to start to try that for yourself raw. Okay, but think diversity. It's not that it's bad that you're cooking with them because they really serve a purpose in a lot of our cooked dishes, right? Those aromatics. So I want you to try that, but maybe even think about the raw version or the raw way of having them. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving. What if I had breast cancer surgery and radiation to my breast? But my gut wasn't treated? Does that mean cancer still be in the GI? So there's a lot of research in this area. So if you remember in the one slide that I kind of skirted like the real details of, there's 4 graphics of how the tumor itself is involved with the gut microbes or microbiome, and the gut microbiome is involved with the tumor. And inflammation is one of them. So we know inflammation is a hallmark of cancer. We know the immune system is involved with most cancers. So for those reasons, probably what's happening in the gut doesn't stay in the gut. So there's probably a systemic effect that could be happening. We don't really know, like I can't give you specific answers to that question, but we think there might be a relationship. They just haven't figured it out yet. So maybe if the gut, was there dysbiosis or being diagnosed with a cancer, did that create dysbiosis? Did that impact inflammation? Did that impact your immune system? It's complicated because if you got treatment, you probably were that compromised your immune system anyway. So it's complicated, but they think there might be a relationship here. So what's the takeaway from that? Until we know more, if it's a specific strain that is involved with a different type of cancer outside of the gut, we have to wait and see. Or is it that we can just eat in a certain way, eat those fermented foods, eat some live active cultures, eat some prebiotics, that maybe that's going to help our gut, and maybe that it has a systemic implication for cancers outside of the gut. I hope I answered that okay. It's complicated though, so I think it's a great question. I've been baking bread, the joy of retirement. Cancer Wellness Center accepts food donations. They can go directly to my office. I added both oat and wheat germ to my bread making. That's amazing. So I generally increased the water slightly. Okay, because yes, it probably swells. Those two things like really can soak up water pretty easily. So you added more water. That's great. That is fantastic. And I wish we had like a place on our website or even at the center where we could sort of keep this list of these types of tips, because I think they're so helpful. So thank you for sharing that. And if I get the courage to try, maybe I will in my own baking ventures. Okay, what are your thoughts on both sprouts and microgreens added to the diet? Are any specific type of vegetable more beneficial? Not really. Again, diversity. And as it relates to today's topic, we want to think diversity. So sprouts and microgreens are going to add to that. We think that sprouts and microgreens have more of an available source of nutrients. So especially our vitamins and minerals, they're more available to our body because they've just been sort of enzymatically like kind of made alive. If that is a thing right there. So I love to recommend sprouts and microgreens, especially if you're not immunocompromised, and especially if you're buying them from the grocery store or a farm. I think it's a great addition to the diet. It's probably going to add some benefit to your gut because it's a different type of whole plant. Right, so think of it in that way. I don't know of its content of prebiotics, but you're eating a different type of a plant, especially if you eat different sprouts and different microgreens, you're going to get that benefit. Okay. Any recommendations for those who have to stay on a low fiber diet? What a great question. So that's when I would reach out to a dietitian, because there probably are things that you might be able to get away with. There's different types of fibers that you might be able to tolerate. That's going to be on a very individual basis. So that might be helpful to work with a dietitian to learn how much can you get away with certain fibers, or does a fiber supplement make sense for you? Does a prebiotic food, where the prebiotics are added to the food, does that make sense for you? Does probiotic make sense for you? It all is going to sort of depend. But I understand some people have to follow low fiber for different health conditions and concerns. So we might just sort of do the best we can in that situation too, but also consider how else could we address what it is that you're looking to accomplish in a way that works for you, that you don't have to disrupt your digestive system. And hopefully that helps. Okay, I think I got through everything.
Very good, Lori.
It's a
You
good
did
Monday.
great with time today. Thank you.
Yeah, so what I'll do, Lisa, I'm going to make a couple edits to those slides because I put the wrong link for one of them. So I'll send them to you, and then they'll be sent out to everybody.
Right. And I will send out an email after I get that from Lori, and the email will include a link to this recording as well as her handouts. So thank you everybody for joining, and hopefully we'll see you on one of Lori's Ask the Dietitians. We have those once a month, and we will be repeating the Global Flavors Ask the Dietitian that we ran 2 weeks ago that we had some technical difficulties. So if you want to see that, we are going to redo that on Friday, this Friday, the 25th. So if you haven't registered already, you can do that online. All right, thanks, Lori.